Good evening. How's everybody? I am now the host and I am recording, so good. We're ready to go. Dr. Hallman, it's just me and you tonight. I think Dr. Griffin Jordan is in a snowstorm in Boston. She's visiting her daughter, and so she texted me a few minutes ago. She's going to try to join us if she can, but said she was stuck in Cambridge and couldn't get an Uber because of the snowstorm. So, well, last time I was there, it was opening week of baseball season and it was snowing. So I think that's pretty normal for them. So
that's my home state.
So that's where you're from?
I am, Boston, Massachusetts.
Yeah, I spent a little time there back in the mid-90s. So,
I went to Boston College.
Yeah, it's the sun only comes out about 2 months out of the year. They've talked about the sun being out. It's always overcast up there. I tell you what, that's kind of depressing. It stays cold till May, and then sun comes out June and July, maybe August, and then the fog rolls back in, and it's overcast the rest of the time.
That's why I moved south.
Yeah, it's but it's a neat place. I enjoyed the time that I spent up there. I did my postdoc, so I was up there a good bit, but it's been a few years back, but I enjoyed it. It was a good time. They talk funny, but that's what they said about me. So yeah, it was a lot of fun being there. Well, welcome back, everybody. I want to do a quick debrief on last week's case study. And then we'll move into our content for the evening. Two things that I want to point out from last week's case study. These are things you've heard all your adult life and probably heard them as a kid, and might not have registered with you back then, but I want to make sure that you understand them, that they definitely do not apply here. So here are the two things that we need to make sure that we understand do not apply. The first is the ends do not justify the means. That was the whole purpose of last week's case study is that it might be a good idea. It might be the right thing you think to do morally, ethically, but it's got to be legally the right thing to do, because that's what they hire as far as school administrators. As when we do our interviewing session this spring, and I've got a tentative date, and I'll announce that pretty quick here. When we do our interviewing session, so when you start interviewing for jobs, one of the questions that you're going to be asked is, if there's a policy or a law in your district that you think is harmful to children, will you still institute support and go by that policy? And the question is, yeah, the answer to that question is always yes. That's what they hire you for. So this notion that, as long as the ends justify the means, I'll be all right. That is not true. That's fast track to losing your house. And the second thing that for some reason we always have this notion, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. That's not true at all. Not when it comes to, especially to dollars, to money. You better find out up front if what you're talking about is allowable. You never want to have to ask forgiveness, because there is no forgiveness if you misspend, especially federal money. They have zero sense of humor about you spending their money incorrectly. They want it back, but they want penalty as well. And so ask permission up front and make sure that you understand that the ends do not justify the means, that you must follow law and policy always. Those are your takeaways from last week. Those are central to all law and finance issues. Those two things. You must get permission up front, and the ends do not justify the means. So that's kind of the takeaway from the case study. Y'all did a great job. When we get back together in 2 weeks, I'll talk about our third case study. Remember, we're off next week, looking at our weekly schedule. Let me share my screen. So this week, we're talking about special education tonight. We're also going to talk about the CAP. Next week, we don't have class because of spring break. The following week, We will talk about our next case study, which will be case study 3. I'll go over that one. So we're doing well on our case study. Spend your time making sure that you don't just do what's in your heart or opinion, that you research the law cases behind these things. Read your book. That's why you have that law book. Make sure you understand, come well armed to the discussion with your colleagues for your collegial discussions, your collaborative groups. Make sure that you're well prepared, that you just hadn't read the case and say, I think it ought to be this way. Again, don't think you're hurting the team. Make sure you have read the chapters that go along with these particular case studies. Make sure that you do that. So that's where we are on that. I do want to commend 2 of our classmates, Laquana and Kristen, who South Carolina folks who passed their practice. Just a reminder, none of you North Carolina people have to take it. It's just for South Carolina people right now. Now, North Carolina people starting this fall will have to take it as well, but you folks will be grandfathered in. You'll be fine. You will not have to take it. You'll be through before August. So we're good to go. You will finish technically, I think, like the 28th of July. So we'll get you in under the wire. So everything's good on you folks. But congratulations to our folks who did take it. I would like to take a second. I'll stop my share. I see we have Kristen with us. Let's see, is Laquana on here too as well? So Kristen, I guess you'll get to speak. Yeah, I see Laquana's on here too.
Yes,
You want to speak to the process of taking the praxis?
I sure can. So I would say definitely use the study materials and take some practice exams and review those questions, because it was extremely helpful when taking the actual praxis. They're not the exact questions, but it at least gives you some idea and concept of it. And definitely our school law class, this part of our course is helping. That helped tremendously. And then a lot of situational scenarios. And so sometimes, especially me being a counselor and a former special ed teacher, I want to think with my heart, but I have to change that. And so I had to start thinking with that administrative brain. But it did this, our courses have helped tremendously.
Well, that's great.
And thank you.
Thank you. Laquana, if you'd like to add anything.
And I was going to agree too. I think my counseling background helped me a lot, but then I also had to think from a perspective of working with my admin and how they handle certain situations and scenarios that was able to help me with taking the test. And I went through ETV and they were able to send me my scores online. And it was actually during COVID because I took it a year ago. So it was not difficult at all. And I think this class definitely helped a lot based on what Dr. Lamb is talking about and all the law information, because a lot of that is on the test and how you would govern yourself and answer certain questions when you're pertaining to students and instruction and keeping them safe.
Yes. And so what we normally recommend is that, at least get halfway through or all the way through 603 and you'll be fine, because it's a lot of scenarios, but a lot of it is focused around that administrative perspective and school law. And so I am so pleased that both of you got through that. What is the cost of the praxis now? What do they charge you?
$130.
130. It's gone up. It was 120, so it's gone up $10. Well, again, our folks starting in with the August cohorts will have to take it in North Carolina again. It's been off the table for about 12 years now. But remembering, I'm so old, I didn't take the ISLIC. I took the national exam. There was a national exam back in my day, but then for a long time, folks in North Carolina, I'm guessing Dr. Holloman probably had to take the ISLIC. I think it was about $500 back when that was a lot of money. So 120 is expensive, but that's probably only about a fourth of the cost of the ISLIC. I don't know when it comes. It was $500 when it was last given in 2010. And so the praxis, I hate to say it, but it's a bargain compared. I mean, when I took the NTE administrator's exam, and I want to say I took it about 40 years ago. It was, if I remember correctly, and again, it's been a day or two, it was like $750 when I didn't even make that much a month. And so at least the price, even though 120 sounds stiff, at least the price has come down over the years. I remember that it was like $10 more than I made that month to take the exam. And the $500 was bad enough, but people didn't complain about the $500 because that was down $250 from what it had previously cost. And so I hope folks will understand not to complain about the 120. That's better than the 500 of the ISWIC back in the day. So the costs are coming down. I know it's still exorbitant. That's $120, but that's less than it used to be. But all you South Carolina folks will need to take that in order to get your license.
And Dr. Lamb, I took it at a testing site. I didn't take it at a school. And I think taking it at a testing site, I felt like it was a whole lot better, just the environment, than having to take it like in a school where I'm in there with about 40 or 50 people.
Yeah.
It was only about maybe 8 or 9 people, and they were taking different tests. It wasn't actually just testing you in one big room.
I was able to take mine at home. It's a pretty neat thing that they're offering now. And so it was kind of scary because I had to scan around the room underneath the table and I couldn't move.
Yeah.
I could not move from my spot. I couldn't breathe a word. They said, don't even read those questions out loud. So I was like,
yeah. The test security is pretty tight if you do the home. I'm remembering several years back when my wife did her national boards and we went to a testing center, and that's been a long time back. That's before you had the ability to take it at home. And I agree with Laquana. The testing center is a much better option than those school sites where, you know, it's like a free for all. Or I would recommend that, or home. Either of those are better options than those cattle call where they pile you in a room. I would suggest going to a place like Huntington or one of those places, or if you can set it up at your home where you can do it there, where it's quiet, where nobody will come in the room and there's some security. That's a good option as well. But my point in all this is other than the $120, don't be afraid. You're prepared. You know your material. If you'll notice, everything that we've done all the way through, every task of every evidence relates back to that exam. Every task of every evidence that we do has been crosswalked with all the national standards to prepare you to take a national exam. Because we have folks from Virginia, some from Tennessee, a few from Georgia, a lot from South Carolina, all of our EDCI folks who come over and do the administrative track with us, and we have a lot of those. They all have to take it. So probably 50% of our folks take it. So, and knock wood, we're still 100%. But that's because if you go in and look at all the tasks that we do, and let me share my screen as a reminder of why we do what we do. Let's see if this one has it on it. You notice right here, every one of these, we crosswalk them with the North Carolina standards for school administrators, CAPE standards, PEASL, and ISTE standards. These all together make up the praxis. The praxis pulls different pieces from each of these different accrediting agencies and puts together their test. And so we make sure that we look at each one and every one of these when we have this rubric of what we want you to do in each of these. You can see these. That everything, and it's this way with every evidence that we do. There is a reason why we're kind of sticklers for following the task and the prompts and making sure you hit everything that you do, because at exam time, you will be glad that we did that. And some of you think, well, I'm always going to be in North Carolina and I'm going to get through. But there's going to be a time when you may want to get an advanced license. You need to take it. There may be a time when you don't think about it, but at some point you'll get old, and you might want to go across the line in another state and double dip. And you'll need a license to do that. And most everybody in North Carolina is now coming back in to the fold. Everybody in the Southeast requires the praxis. We're the only state that doesn't, and have since 2010, but that ends this year. And so if you want to go get licensed in another state, you're going to have to take that praxis, but you're going to be prepared. And again, I would echo what Kristen said. We have that link in our shells to the praxis, and it has those free practice tests. Make sure you take a couple of those. That's all you really need to do. Don't spend some large amount of money going to some training center. They'll just give you generic tips on how to take a test. That really won't help you. You folks are all expert at how to take tests. Y'all know how to do that. You need to be focused on content. So I appreciate both of our classmates who've done that. The rest of you who need to, don't be afraid. You'll do great, I'm quite sure. All right, let's talk about the CAP. So the CAP is the fifth of the evidences. We're going to get an early jump. Some of you, as I said, we won't have class next week. Some of you are to the point where you're finishing up your skip. You can jump right into your CAP, and as you're going to see when we get to CAP past 2, you're going to see why we're trying to get a little head start on it. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll go back to the CAP. All right. So the CAP is the Cultural Advocacy and Analysis and Advocacy Plan, Cultural Advocacy Action Plan. And so what we're doing here is we're looking at our teacher working conditions survey, the culture of our school, and we're going to try to improve things in 5 specific areas. Now, you say, but Dale, there's 12 areas on the North Carolina Teaching Working Conditions Survey, and then that Advanced Ed Cognia Survey in South Carolina has about 12 sections in it as well. They do. But we're going to focus on 5. Now, you can, here's the trick right off the bat. You can add more than these 5 that you see right here. Empowerment, that is teacher leadership section, where it says teacher leadership in the TWC or in Cognia Advanced Ed. Empowerment is teacher leadership. Leadership is school leadership, facilities, resources, and time. Those 5 areas are required. You can't say, well, I want to do these 5 over here, or we don't really have a problem in a couple of these. And I should see those 5 all the way through each of the 4 tasks of the CAP. You can't just look at those and say, now, in task 1 and in task 2, you pick up with management of student conduct. No, you can add management of student conduct if you want to for a 6th one, but it can't substitute for one of these 5. Let me say that again. I must see these 5 all the way through each of the 4 tasks of the CAP. I must see these 5 required ones. Time, facilities, resources, teacher leadership, school leadership. I must see those 5 all the way through. If you want to add a 6th or 7th one, be my guest. That would be marvelous. If you have a student behavior management problem at your school, you might want to add that one. That will be fine. Just as a point of information, in real life, if your school exceeds the district or the state average in the number of disciplinary incidents and or out of school suspensions, you will be asked to write an addendum to your school improvement plan, which is known as a school safety plan. Let me say that again. If your school exceeds the district or the state average in either or number of disciplinary incidents or number of out of school suspensions, if you exceed the district average or the state average, you will be asked to add an additional section to your school improvement plan called a school safety plan. So if you know you have that issue at your school, it might not be a bad idea to add managing student conduct to these 5 and have a 6th one. If that's not an issue at your school, I would just go with these 5 and run. Now, I like the middle view when you pull teacher working condition survey. I like the middle view. And you say, Dale, what in the world does that mean? Let me move this out of the way. And I'm going to walk you in from the outside. So what we would do, we would go to Google and we would do NCTW, Teacher Working Condition Survey Results 2020. Remember, it's just given every other year. The results aren't back from 2022 yet. So you will use the one from 2020. And so here it is. All right, so here are all the ones, and I'm going to pick on Dr. Holloman. You go to that one. This is the one that I like. So here's Franklinton High School. Here's the one I like right here in the middle one. There's 3 different views. Pick the middle one. And the reason why is it's already got your school district and state. It's got the questions right here. Time is one of the ones that we're going to use. It's got it right across there for you. It's already done. Facilities and resources. So this one is required. This one is required. This one is not. Community support and involvement. We just used that one though in the skip, if you'll remember. Managing student conduct. If that's an issue at your school, you can add that one. It's not required. Teacher leadership, that would be empowerment. And then school leadership. You just did this one in the skip as well. This is the view that we like, and those are the 5 that we have to do. Again, we're required to do time, facilities, and resources. This counts as 2. Teacher leadership and school leadership. Those are the ones we want. You can just copy and paste them right off of there. And you can highlight, what it tells you, the lowest ones. And you can see one of the reasons I like this is it will give you a color code and draw your eye to the things that are low at your school. And that's one of the reasons why I like it so well. It's easy for me to understand. And the numbers are right there. So we are to look at those 5 areas now, and we figure out which ones are the lowest. I would pick no more than 1 or 2 maximum for each of those 5 areas. So I would look at the lowest item in each of those 5 areas, maybe 2 if you got 2 that are low. And then when you do your needs assessment, you simply survey those same questions back to your faculty again. You send them a survey. You don't even have to change the syntax. So let's go back again to that screen. All right, so under time for the school, 78, 78, 83, I'd only probably pick one of them. I might pick both of those 78s. Well, there's actually 3 78s. So I would probably pick efforts are made to minimize the amount of routine paperwork teachers are required to do. That would be the question. That would be the survey question back to teachers from time. On facilities and resources, you notice the ones up at the top are about resources. The ones down toward the bottom are facilities. And so up at the top, this would definitely be mine on resources. Teachers have sufficient access to appropriate instructional materials. I would make sure that I resent that as one of my survey questions. And then down toward the bottom, you know, I would pick any of these, probably in clean environment. So we got to have 2 out of this section because facilities and resources are required. Got to have 2 out of that one. Don't have to have 1 for that one. Teacher leadership, looking at that on the school level, right here's your lowest one. The school, we take steps to solve problems. That would be my question on my needs assessment survey. And then on school leadership, 83, 80. We got a 75 here. Teachers feel comfortable raising concerns that are important to them. And we would resurvey those. I think that's either 8 or 9 questions. What we're doing is we're verifying that these are actual problems in our school through quantitative methods of survey methodology. We send a quick, you know, Qualtrics or a Survey Monkey or a Google survey, whatever. We just do a quick, should have somewhere between 5 and 10 questions so that we hit all 5 of those areas and we survey. Is this really a problem, or are you just mad at Dr. Hallman that day when you filled it out? You know, we want to know, is this really a problem? So that's what we do in task 1, prompts 1 and 2 of the CAP. Let's go back to our. So we're going to present our data for these 5 areas in prompt 1 and prompt 2. We are going to resurvey the 5 to 10 lowest items. We'll get that back. We'll do a quick data analysis of that, and we'll come up with a set of recommendations that we think that might address these problems. That's very important, because when we go to task 2, and this is why you understand we got to do this before we get to May, is we got to go out and we got to ask people why. We're going to do qualitative work now. We're going to go ask people, why are these things low in our building? What do you think? And what do you think about some of these recommendations to address those problems? Those recommendations will help prime the pump when you talk with people about what they think, why these are problems in our school, why these items are low, and what we could do to address them. Here's something I thought of. Why don't we try, what do you think about trying this? And they, you know, the classic example is planning time. And you go out and you ask teachers and they say, well, putting more in the schedule won't help. We got to have substitutes. I'm spending all my planning time covering class. So you need to come up with some recommendations to try to prime the pump. You'll use qualitative data instruments to collect specific data. Now that we're back in school, you can talk to people, or you can do open-ended survey. I will allow open-ended survey. If you don't have access to folks and you can't talk with them specifically, I will allow you to do some open-ended survey where you got, here's my recommendations. What do you think? I would prefer that you talk to people. And so it says right here, qualitative through survey, observations, and interviews. Survey, we will allow open-ended survey because it says we should, but we prefer if you get, generally when you talk to people, there's a richness of data that comes out through talking with folks, and some ideas, and kind of sparks some notions and some follow-up questions. One of the problems with using survey for qualitative data gathering is you can't do follow-up questions. That's one of your problems. And if you're talking with people, you can kind of, oh, that's a good idea. Expand on that. Tell me more about that. Well, how would that work? Those kinds of things. What we're interested in is trying to do things to help the culture of our building. And talking with people is always a best practice when you're doing qualitative work. Dr. Holloman, are you still there? I see your camera has gone off. He must have stepped away. So that's what we make sure that we do, is we talk to people when we can. So in task 1, prompt 1, we're going to do our data dive on our teacher working condition survey or advanced ed survey in South Carolina. Then we're going to go back and resurvey the lowest 5 to 10 items as our needs assessment to see if they're really low. And then in task 2, we're going to go out and talk with people. We're going to go and do that. And then we're going to do a kind of a cultural competency audit. He's having to reset. He didn't connect it for some reason. Okay, he's still with us. So in task 3, when we get to task 3, we're going to do a cultural competency audit. We're going to look at the mission and vision of our school. We're going to look at the school leadership. We're going to tell about it. Teacher quality is experienced by measured by experience and certification. This is all on your state report card. Parental involvement and support. That's on your state report card. Conflict resolution and student achievement. All these things are this is kind of data you collected or should have collected during the process of OMA Task 1. A lot of this is going to be there. So we're going to kind of revisit OMA Task 1 here to get this, and it should include a risk. So now you've looked at your hard data, you've gone out and done qualitative, you've looked at your school, what does my school look like? And now you're going to come up with a final list of recommendations that include specific activities and programs. You had an initial set of recommendations that you taught after you did your quantitative work in task 1 that guided your interviews in task 2. Now you've added that information from task 2 along with a snapshot of what your school looks like, which also helps shape your recommendations. And now we're going to have, at the end of task 3, we're going to have a list of recommendations of activities and programs. And of course, in task 4, we're going to make an action plan. And we're going to use that same graphic organizer that we're going to have a cultural competence plan or an action plan, and it's going to look just like the other ones that we've done. Now we will not do a competency analysis as the last task. We're going to wait to the SIOP and do them all at the end of the SIOP. We'll do all of the competencies then. So there are 4 tasks, but now there's one of them is not competency analysis like you've had in the past. This one, we have an extra step in here for qualitative. So we have 4 tasks: collect our quantitative, do a needs assessment, which is just double checking on what our TWC says. We do a qualitative, interviews, observations, and or open-ended survey. We take a look at our school, a snapshot of where we are culturally right now, come up with another set of a final set of recommendations at the end of task 3. And then in task 4, we write our plan as we always do. Using that standard graphic organizer that we always use: specific activity, persons responsible, formative, summative assessment, resources needed, both fiscal and human, our goal, what we're trying to change, which is obviously our percentage and positive percentages on TWC, and what our indicator of success would be. If we're at 68, we can't expect to go to 100% next time. If we make 5 points a game, we've done well. So that would be an indicator of success. If we move from 73 to 78 or 78 to 83, that's what we're looking to do. Your indicator of success, I'll go ahead and fill in the blank, should be about move up about 5 points, and you'd be in good shape. Dr. Holloman, you want to speak to how TWC works at your school?
Well, and actually, you were showing some of our data, and I remember vividly giving out the codes for teacher working conditions survey about 7 days before Governor Cooper announced schools are going to shut down for 2 weeks. And so when we started to pull our data at the end of it, and we actually began to talk to teachers once we got everything back in, we then had kind of almost a gap year. A lot of the things we talked about that were issues in 2019, 2020 were no longer issues in 2020, 2021. The things that were highlighted on our list of things we want to address were things like, how do we get more parents involved in things at the school? We couldn't get them involved during that year. Tardies were the disciplinary action that when we sent out the separate survey were the one thing they wanted us to make sure we addressed more consistently. Well, we didn't have tardies in 2021, 22 because 2021 because we had an AB day or we had virtual, and all of a sudden tardies didn't matter because we only had 400 people on campus. So we actually went back and used that data starting this year to try to remember what we were talking about when school shut down in 2020, and how to address that differently and how to work on some of those things. That was just a kind of a surreal type of thing to do. And we break it down by looking at all the areas that we're lower than our district and the state, but the district is the one that we really look at. And so a lot of ours, when we look at it, I can point out the exact things that are going to be the concerns for us. Teachers are not consistent in their discipline. Students are not, disciplined fairly, or not fairly, but consistently. And consistency in their eyes for a teacher, I think, is usually going to be, are they all getting the same punishment, which isn't what we do. So we break it down by those, top categories that we see as an issue where we're not in line with our district, other high schools, and then the state. And then how do we improve those? Usually our school improvement team does that during summer session. We break that down, and then we actually work with departments when we come back during our planning days to put ideas on the table, or when we're doing our whole staff development to make those things actionable. So you have to take it from the survey to kind of narrowing down what those issues actually mean to the teachers, what they meant when they answered the question, and then how do you make it actionable for the next year to be part of your school improvement plan.
And that's thank you, Dr. Holman. That's exactly what we're teaching you to do through the CAP. Here's the hard numbers. We go back and do a double check. We send them the lowest ones out. Are these truly still the issues or problems with our school? And then we go and talk to people. How can we make this actionable? What can we do? Here's some recommendations that we have as administration. What do you think about these? And then we put our school in context during task 3. We look at teacher quality and principal leader. We look at all the mission, vision. What are we trying to do here? And then we come up with an actionable set of recommendations that build our action plan, or our cultural advocacy plan, our CAP, CAP at the end. It's an action plan, cultural advocacy plan is what it is. But again, we're trying to make this data actionable. How can we make working conditions better for teachers? How can we? So this one, we have focused on students. We focused on academics. We focused on, we got to run school for students. But we also, I told you, just wait. We won't. Now that doesn't mean you'll think I'm a better person, but I told you, just wait. We'll get around to looking after teachers. Once we get the academic piece, and we've got the management piece, and we've got a professional development piece, and all those. Now let's talk about how we can make our school better for the people who work here every day, and by extension, a better experience for our students as well, that we would eventually get here. We normally don't get here till till this is normally taught in 605, when we're focusing on how to make schools better in 605. Make it a more enjoyable experience for everybody else, but you're just getting kind of the early view here. But as I told you, we have specific things that we do. It's been a process bringing you along, but I told you, I'm pretty hard on teachers, but we'd get to the point where now we're going to focus on teachers. Now we're going to focus on our staff, trying to make things better for them, so that they're happy to come to work every day, and that they don't stay stressed out and at the end of their rope all the time. It's incumbent upon us as administrators to be decent human beings and provide a working environment that is conducive for professional behavior. And so, Dr. Holman, I'm going to put you on the spot again here. How much of your evaluation as a principal in Franklin County, how much does teacher working conditions survey, the results of that, how much does that play in your evaluation as a principal?
So Franklin County actually has a yearly survey that goes out to all staff members, not just teachers, but teacher assistants, cafeteria, bus drivers. That we actually break it down by all of our department areas. And so every year there's another survey that goes out to all of our staff members, and it specifically is actually talking about my performance. What am I doing? How am I enacting those things in the TWC? Not just as a school, what are we doing? Because those parts are there also, but there are questions about my leadership performance. Those are part of my mid-year evaluation conference and my end of the year evaluation conference. What am I doing to address those? How am I improving those areas? They're anonymous. There are open comments that can also be on that. there's good and bad to that. I typically, try to take some things with a grain of salt. There are other things that I appreciate the fact that I have some feedback. I get a lot of feedback from teachers openly, but then every now and then there's something I'm sure someone doesn't want to share. So they have an outlet for that if they need to. But that is directly tied to my end of year evaluation. And, it's really not, is there a problem? Is there a problem? Yes. What am I doing to try to resolve it? What's the plan that we put in place with it? Who did I involve as stakeholders? Did I make it actionable? And then have we seen any growth from it? So it's rarely, well, we had a complaint or we had a concern here because of a number that was lower than maybe another school or where we thought it needed to be. It's really, well, now what are you going to do about it? And that's a compliment I think I received from a superintendent years ago. Wasn't that I didn't make a mistake. It's that he said I never made the same mistake twice. That's a great compliment. You learn from it, you grow from it, you make adjustments, and you involve the right people. It's not management and leadership from just your vantage point. You've got to have a team around you to make sure that change is happening. And the last 3 years have taught us that you can't do this by yourself. There's no way.
Yeah. And this is kind of a minor point, but some of you are already doing your facilities walkthroughs. And that's tied directly to, as you can see, to the teacher working condition surveys. And one of the takeaways that I have in that is this: just documenting that something is wrong or bad or needs attention. Okay, but what are you going to do about it? It's your responsibility to follow through to try to improve that. And it's real easy. And I use the facilities as the example because it's really easy to say, did you fix that broken window or you didn't? Just simply writing it down. Yeah, there's a window broken or there's a fire extinguisher that's expired. You wrote it in your report. Did you follow up and make it actionable? Well, no, I wrote it down that it wasn't working. Well, that doesn't do anybody any good. What we want to see administratively is, what did you do? How did you make it actionable? What did you go and do to see about that? Well, I don't do fire extinguishers. Did you call the fellow that does them? Well, yeah, but he didn't answer his phone. Did you call him again the next day? Did you ride over to his office and find him? What did you do to make it actionable? I use that example because it's very concrete and you can see if you fixed it or not. But that's what we're talking about here. that your scores are low in some areas. Yeah, that's you want them to be higher, but the issue is, what will you do to fix them? What the CAP teaches you is how to make it actionable. If you've got low numbers, this is the process you go through to try to address those low numbers. You go out and talk with people, you involve different folks, you put a team together, all those things. You're told to do that in the CAP. CAP just is the process that Dr. Hallman just says that he goes through and that he's required to do, that he's evaluated on. You doggone right, you're evaluated on this. And you say, well, how do I make these numbers go? This is how you make those bad numbers go up. That's the whole notion of the CAP, is how do you make it actionable? Here are issues with our school. What can we do to fix them? Again, it's not that they're low. What are you going to do to fix it? That's the whole notion of the CAP, is this is your process. Just like in the APTEL, we taught you a process of how to grow not good teachers into good teachers. That's the whole notion. This is how do we take, Skip was about how do we get parents who aren't involved, how do we get involvement with our parents? It's all of these are how to. They're action plans at the end. How to make them actionable. We're trying to improve the culture of our building. This is how you go about doing that. So that's what the CAP is. It's just as simple as I just laid it out for you. Again, there is no template. You make your own like you did with the Skip, but you can jump in and get started. Now you can begin to see, well, that's why Dale wants us to start before May. because we can't go talk to people during testing, and they won't let us be sending out surveys during testing and review and all of that. About May 1st, you're going to have to, we'll have to kind of put things on hold. Again, we don't want to aggravate our administration. So we'll need to get our surveys, our needs assessment, the lowest 5 to 10 items, we resurvey and come up with our recommendations and go talk with people. That's why we're here it is, fairly early March still, and tomorrow will be the 10th. And we got a couple of holidays coming up here, so we got to get on this. We need to have our data collected, our recommendations, our first set of recommendations, go out and collect our qualitative. We need to be done with that here before too much longer. If we wait too long, I mean, we'll be out of the mode of being able to collect any data before this class is even over this spring. So don't wait too long. If you can jump into this, you need to in the next couple of weeks. You need to get into this here, because we're going to start having holidays, spring break and Easter and all that. The time it'll be May before you know it. The days are getting longer. It's not as cold. It's warmer, more sunlight. The time just between now, the doldrums of winter are over. And between now and the 1st of May, when you start doing review and testing season, this is the fastest 6 weeks of the school year, hands down. It's like 6 days. You wake up and it's May. Same thing every year in school. You know that. You all have been in it a day or two. You know how it just flies by. February doesn't seem like it's ever going to get over. And then from here till May, it's just a blink of the eye. We have the same problem every year. Folks don't get to this, and then by the time they get to summer school, we can't do it. It's testing, and then by the time it's over, they're gone, and it's early June, and everybody's gone. They can't do this, and they still got plenty of time to do it. Except there's nobody left at school to do it with. Then you're trying to hunt people down. That never goes well. Trust me. So you got about 6 more weeks that you can knock out your skip and get this and at least get the first 2 tasks knocked out of the cap. You got about 6 weeks to get it done, including all the break time. That includes that time. So no time like the present. Questions you have for me on the cap? All right. Let's talk about EC and intervention. We're right on our time. I got about 15 minutes. That's about what we need. So let me
I have
share
one
my
general
screen.
question.
Yes.
When are we going to be equipped to apply for that school admin licensure? Is it after our summer course?
Yeah, you have to wait until you actually have your official transcript. That's a great question.
Okay.
Not my share. So let me kind of give you a rundown on what happens. Is all right. So we finish this course first week in May, 1 week off. Not really, because you got to keep going. But you got one. Then we'll start summer school. Summer school is 10 weeks, but everything's got to be finished in 8 weeks by the middle of July. And then they'll do your degree evaluation, do all that stuff, all your paperwork, and then you will finish the last Friday in July. Will be your official completion date. Will be the last Friday in July. Your transcript. At that point, you can go into DPI's website in North Carolina or South Carolina and start your paperwork. They have Form B, Form 5, Form B that you have to fill out. And you have to upload everything. Your official transcript will be available no later than a week after. By the next Friday, it will be done. You can fill out your paperwork. You upload your official transcript. Ms. Turbyfield, the licensure person, will send you an email about the 1st of July that highlights the process. And then she also has a letter. I actually had a request for one right before class started tonight. While you're waiting for DPI to grant your license, or or Department of Ed in South Carolina to grant your license, she has a letter that she can send to prospective district that says that you're pending your license whenever it comes. Now, you can interview this spring for fall jobs because you will be licensed officially as of July 30th. You will have your license. Now, you won't have it in hand It may take 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 weeks for them to actually physically send you your copy. But you will be licensed the day that you graduate from this program, which will be on Friday, July, whatever the last Friday is. And we can provide a letter. So you can start interviewing for jobs for the fall this spring, even though you're not done yet. You're going to have a license by August. So you can go ahead and start interviewing. I'm going to do an interviewing session with you on getting you prepared for those interviews. Kristen, you got a question?
Yes, sir. I was just wondering, do I contact you for that letter? Because I do have an upcoming interview in the next, well, I guess now at this point, it's pretty soon. So who do I need to contact
All
to get
right,
that
that's a
letter?
great question. Prior to graduate, all right, so July 29th, prior to July 29th, you contact me. And I will send a letter that says that you're in good standing and everything is good and that you're on track to graduate on the 29th of July. After the July 29th, while you're pending licensure, you have to contact Miss Turbyfield. She has an official document that has to be sent that says you already have it. You're just waiting for them to send it. And so if you got an interview coming up between now and July 29th, you simply send me an email. Same day, I'll send back a letter that says Kristen is, is on schedule to graduate on the 29th. And she'll be fully licensed on July 29th, 2022. And they'll let you interview. So that would be me until the 29th, the 30th of July or after. Sometimes it's November before they send those things. Seriously, it's ridiculous how long it takes them to send out those copies of the license. So during that period of time, it's Miss Turbyfield. She is
Thank you.
licensure specialist.
I'm sorry.
I'll send you an email tomorrow
That is correct.
so I can get that letter. Thank you.
That is correct.
I'm just a little confused about the language of licensure. So are you saying by having the degree, I'm licensed, or don't I have to formally apply?
No, you have to formally apply.
Okay.
You have to formally apply. But
And
the assumption is that you
Mhm.
have formally applied as soon as you were eligible to do that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Now, you
And-
can't say, well, I'm going to get my license and not. We've had a few that have done that over the years. Well, I didn't want to have to apply because I was going to have to pay. I just wanted them to send it to me. No, I think there's a $55 fee when you apply for the license. They want their money. So they won't send you your license until you fill out the form. We'll send all the stuff, or you will, and we'll help you with that, but they want their $55. So yes, you have to apply. They have an online portal. You have to apply.
So does it make sense to apply to 2 states at once, or 1 state first and then apply for reciprocity? Because I'm over the border. So should I be applying to North Carolina, waiting for them to respond, then applying for reciprocity?
If you're in South Carolina and
Mhm.
you want to apply for North Carolina, you need to go to their website and apply in North Carolina. It's faster and quicker and easier. Now, if you have to do reciprocity, you can. It just takes longer and it's a little more convoluted. But for all you South Carolina people, if you want North Carolina license right now, just apply. And it'll save you time and money. Just apply, because
Why is it easier to apply for the North Carolina one?
because you went through a program in North Carolina.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That matters.
Okay.
We're a preferred provider in North Carolina. We are not a preferred provider in South Carolina because we're not housed in South Carolina. You have to be housed in that state to be a preferred provider.
Mhm.
And so if you're in South Carolina, it's easy to provide for a North Carolina license because we're an EPP in North Carolina. We can't be in South Carolina because we're not housed there. Now they they take our licensure recommendations because we're CAPE accredited. That's a national accreditation. And so if you have that, we can get you licensed in any state with CAPE accreditation. But in North Carolina, it's a done deal. It's easy peasy in North Carolina. But that's the same way for any college in any state that they reside in. That's just not a Gardner Webb thing. That's, you know, if you were at Clemson right now and you applied in South Carolina, their preferred provider just goes right through. So that's the way licensure works. All right, we got a couple minutes to talk about exceptional children. I want to point out a couple of things. I have several things. I can close that. And close that. All right. So if we go to tonight, I've got a PowerPoint here on inclusion versus mainstreaming. Inclusion model is where kids are in regular classes and the teacher goes in. For the purposes of this PowerPoint, mainstreaming is when they're out and they go to the EC teacher's class. Now, one of the things I want to point out is folks say, well, inclusion doesn't work as well as having kids go to the EC teacher's class. And my answer to that is nobody ever said it did. It saves 30% on personnel costs. The reason why we went to the inclusion model is not because we delivered services better to students or even as good. It meets the letter of the law and saves 30% on personnel. That's why we went to the inclusion model. Now, don't be fooled into thinking, well, this works just as good or this is better. It's neither. It's just cheaper, and it meets the requirements of the law, the letter of the law. And so inclusion is when the kid would be in the room and somebody would come over. Now this is very prescient for us. Our last case study is going to be about this. Well, it's actually going to be about everything that we've done pretty much this semester. But most specifically, parents are complaining about the inclusion model. But the twist on the last case study number 4 this semester is it's not the EC parents that are complaining. It's the regular ed kids who are complaining. As I told you last week, it's amazing now. Parents will walk into your school now and say the most racist, misogynistic, or discriminatory things. But they'll start their comments with, I am not a fill in the blank, racist, misogynist, or bigot. And then they'll go and they'll proceed to say some of the most racist, misogynist, and bigoted things you've ever heard. That's just the way the world works now. In my day, early on in the EC, back when I was a school administrator, you know, in the 80s, it was all the EC parents coming in complaining, my child's not getting what they're supposed to get. Because remember, there is a parent resource handbook, right here it is. Actually, right here it is. They know what their rights are. The modern version of the parent complaint about exceptional children is not the EC parent. It's the gen ed parent who says, by putting those EC kids in my kid's classroom is preventing my child from getting the basic education that they're guaranteed, that we talked about through Leandro last week. It's amazing now. So our last case study is about complaining parents. That's one of the facets of the case, but it's not the EC parents that are complaining. It's the gen ed parents that are complaining. So you need to take a look at what the difference between how the old model of where kids went to the EC teacher versus the newer model of inclusion. You need to look at that. It's really good. It explains all that stuff in depth, and that's really going to be helpful for your last case study. Let me go ahead and do that. I've got the intervention process. The thing to know about is that's between 30 and 90 days prior to the 90 days of the EC placement process. The standard EC process is a child is referred. There's 30 days of anecdotals, 30 days of the first intervention, 30 days of either a repeat of that or a different intervention, and then a testing decision is made. MTSS, multi-tier system support, RTI, whatever, your district uses is up to 90 days before the official 90 days, where you have different levels of intervention that you try, and then you go to the EC 90 days. So it can be up to 180 days before a kid is tested. But here's the thing to remember. Once they start that MTSS process, once they're in that inclusion model, you got to know as the principal what they're supposed to get and if they're getting it, because the EC people are not the people responsible. Let me say that again. The school principal is responsible for the intervention process at their school, not the EC department teacher chair or your CT compliance technician. Nope. Now, they may be on your intervention team, but they are not the responsible person. You are legally to make that kid is getting that intervention service prior to that EC service. And so intervention teams are what is known as school-based committees, SBTs. That comes under the purview of the principal. So Dr. Hallman, even though he's at a high school, he still has to have an intervention team that addresses kids with behavior, attendance, or academic issues. And whatever his district says they're supposed to get as an intervention, he's responsible to make sure they get it. Now, different districts are different places in that intervention model because of COVID. The plan was everybody was supposed to be there by last summer, but everybody obviously because of COVID, they aren't. But people are but in some point about next summer, I suspect everybody's going to have to be where they do the full MTSS 30-30-30 and then start the EC 30-30-30 prior to a testing decision. Now, once a kid has been referred past the intervention period and they're now referred and they're in the EC process, not identified EC, not tested, it's the 90 days that leads up to that testing decision, they have the same rights as if they're an EC child. Goes back to suspension, you can't change your placement, in-school suspension counts the same as out. 10 days, if you exceed, if you get to 10 days, you got to do a manifestation determination, the functional behavior assessment, the DEC 5 behavior intervention plan, and a reevaluation of their IEP. You got to do all those things before you can, once you get to 10 days of suspension, whether it be in or out of school. If you change an EC kid's placement, that counts. If you moved him out of his regular environment. Now, please remember, we talked about this already. If a kid does the same thing 3 times in a row, even though you didn't suspend him but one day, and you say, well, I still got 7 days left. No. If the kid is showing a pattern, and 3 is a pattern, according to federal law, he moves to the front of the line. You got to do the manifestation. You got to do the whole EC ritual: manifestation, termination, functional behavior assessment, behavior intervention plan, reeval, psychological, the whole deal. If he is showing a pattern or she is showing a pattern of the same behavior, so we have to be careful with those. Now, if you have a kid that's in that 90 days prior to that EC testing, they still get those same protections as an EC kid. So you can say, well, he hadn't placed in EC yet that had been tested. I can put him out for many days. No, you can't. Can't put him out as many as you want. He gets the same protections as if he'd already placed. At the end of the official 90-day EC process, a decision on testing is made. And then I have these sites right here on IDA, and it tells you right here, 10 basic steps, what the process is when we get there. Key terms, your parental, but here, right here is child is identified possibly needing special ed and related services. This is the official 90-day EC. This is after whatever your school did for intervention for up to 90 days. That didn't work, and so now he's identified as possibly needing special ed. He is referred to the EC department now. This is after the intervention team. Child is evaluated. You do a 30-day anecdotals, and you do all that, and then child eligibility is decided, child is evaluated, is tested, and here's how it goes. The IEP meeting is held, the IEP is written, Progress is measured and reported. IEP is reviewed. Child is reevaluated every 3 years. That's the way it works. But this is once they hit the formal, he's been referred to EC. Now, in 2014, in August, right before school year started, those of you who are Charlotte Mecklenburg people remember, if you remember back that far, August, I think it's August 14th, 11 elementary principals were relieved of their duties. Because what they were doing is they were not following IDA that we just showed you. I just showed you there. What they were doing is, as soon as kids were referred to the EC department, what were they doing within a week? They were having them tested. They weren't doing 30 days of anecdotals, trying any interventions or whatever. They were just testing them right away. And it was racially and gender identifiable. Black males, they went to the front of the line. They didn't bother trying intervention with them. They were just having them EC tested right away, as a way to get them out of the teacher's hair, as a way to, that was a disciplinary technique in those 11 elementary schools. That was their go-to discipline move. We'll just get them EC, put them self-contained and get them out of everybody's hair. So they had weaponized it. The whole notion of exceptional children's services is to serve kids. Please remember, I never went to school with exceptional children. I'm too old. This didn't happen until 1970, 74, 94, 142 didn't come along until 74, 75. But all of you have known nothing but that. But there was a lot of folks my age and older that never went to school with EC, and they simply saw exceptional children as a deterrent, as a disciplinary measure. Those days are long gone, thankfully. But folks still do it. Folks still abuse the process. Now, while the EC department at your school will be up to them to make sure that the rights of the EC kid is upheld, you will be an LEA representative at the IEP meeting. Please remember that those are collaborative, that parents have to have a say in that IEP and have to go along with it. It is a collaborative. Doesn't matter who did the paperwork. You get some folks who are, well, I did all this work. Why do they get a say? Well, because that's the way the process works. The parent is a collaborative partner in this. And you got to remember that, folks. You can't just bully and overcome parents on these things. And you can't use your exceptional children's services as a disciplinary tool to try to, to punish kids or get them out of the mainstream or to control their behaviors. That's not the point of exceptional children's services. That doesn't happen nearly as much as it did back in my era, but it still happens from time to time. And please remember, the intervention that you have up to 90 days where you're trying to help a kid before they get into the official 90 days of EC, you are responsible to make sure that those services, whatever they are in your district, are delivered with fidelity. Dr. Hallman, I'm gonna close with you tonight to talk about your EC services, and we'll be done.
Well, high school is a little different, obviously, because most of the time students who come to us have already been identified. Obviously, with elementary school, you have to really be very careful with the beginnings of identification, where those discrepancies are, the need for testing, how the testing begins. So you need to have your team really fine-tuned at the elementary school level. Typically it comes from teachers providing documentation and providing assessment data. Middle school, again, fewer students than are identified in middle school. We're usually providing services. At the high school level, we usually have the three different areas we'll start to see. Self-contained is really just an adaptive classes between severe, profound, and some moderate. We have students who are mainstreamed EC, who are LD. They're in regular classes with our students at the school, even some in honors classes and even AP classes. So you have to be aware of the AIG EC potential overlap that happens, because it could be a student who's autistic, who is taking classes at a high level. And then we have students who are in what's called OCS, or the Occupational Course of Study, North Carolina. Those students kind of fall between those two areas. They their discrepancy at that point in time is enough that they are not going to be successful in a regular classroom, taking a normal core class required by the state. So there's an occupational course of study. And so breaking all of that down, knowing where the services are, and Dr. Lamb, you mentioned inclusion. For us, obviously 14 or less is easy in a self-contained classroom. What you need to also remember, it's also 50% of the total number of students in the classroom. It cannot be more than that with EC. So if you have a class of 24, that's your inclusion classroom, and you have 14 of those are EC, it's no longer an inclusion classroom. It's now an EC classroom, and you need to rethink your model. So
Yeah.
how you do that, depending upon the number of students you have, the kind of caseload you have, and then also the services you can provide, changes greatly. And so we're sitting down usually every 2 weeks. We have our student services management team, which also doubles with MTSS. And then we have another group.
Yeah.
Yep. And then another group that meets that is related to EC services and 504s and ESL. So those kind of, work in tandem, depending upon the students that are there, but, what services need to be provided for those students. They sometimes overlap because of attendance and behavior, but usually we try to, track them a little bit differently regarding the EC services. So, it's two different teams, that are working on that, every 2 weeks. So every other week, one of them is meeting. And if you have a carryover, then that student might be picked up every week, just to keep up with, for us around, I think we're about 280, 260, 270 EC students. Then you have 504s, you have ESL. I think we've got 52 ESL students right now at our school. And so it's just making sure that all of those pieces are in process, but you've done all the identification, you've met with students, you've met with parents, you're keeping all of your meetings checked in place, services are provided, and then teachers are aware of everything that needs to be done. That is truly a job in itself. And I have a great assistant principal who's a former EC specialist, and her job is to truly make sure that all those meetings are managed. The T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, and we don't go to court for anything. So if you don't know the information personally, learn it first of all, but also find someone who's an expert in it and who can help make sure that those things have been done, because it can catch up on you very quickly.
Thank you, Dr. Holloman. Again, I have links to IDA. I have links to the parent resources. I have all those links. I have one to FERPA, privacy laws, making sure that you're keeping the information confidential. All those links are in under tonight's Zoom session 9. And you need to start, if you don't know these things, if you're not an expert like Kristen is, if you're not that expert, you need to start getting yourself expert in these special population programs. And to kind of close out for the evening, one of the things that Dr. Holloman said, one of the things about high school is you kind of hybridize some of these. In elementary, it's here's your intervention team, and here's your EC, and here's this particular, here's your 504s. And you have so many, and you're in the identification phase. When it gets to high school, you kind of put together a team that has all of these people together. One of my doctoral students right now is at Greer High School, and that's who we're working with at her school. And they handle the self-contained and the occupational that don't get a diploma, and they handle intervention and behavior. They handle this one group is kind of a clearinghouse. That's kind of the way the best high schools, as Dr. Holloman just pointed out, they kind of create this one organism, this one unit that handles all the different pieces, because sometimes at the high school level, there is overlap that you don't see at the lower level. But in the end, as he said, if you're not expert, you better get expert, or you better have an AP that is. Because if you again, this is federal money. And they have that's how we started tonight. I always like to circle back. We started tonight with the feds have no sense of humor when you spend their money wrong. I can tell you that right now. You got to stay out of court, because you got to take your checkbook every time you go. And hopefully you get to go, because sometimes you don't get to go back. You do not misspend federal money more than once. that does not become a habit. Let me share that with you. Thank you all for your attendance tonight. We always appreciate you coming. We appreciate your questions and your involvement. Again, congratulations to LaQuana and Kristen for passing the exam. If you have any questions about that, just let me know. If you need letters, but now in preparation for interviews, let me know and I'll zip those right to you. And so y'all get the whole week off next week. Y'all don't have to see us. And so we'll see you back in 2 weeks. So everybody have a good time. Have a good holiday. Thank you. Good night.